days with what is happening to the system of international government. A lot of this has to do with the current United States administration and its basic walking away from the notion that the international community must work together if we're going to have the kind of world that we want, the future that we want. We're going to have a world where nations and blocks going in different directions. A lot of conflict is out there. And my hope is that we can build a world in which countries work together, discuss together, in which, and I'm serious about this, war is ruled out as a means for settling disputes between them among countries. And we'll see whether or not the United States can become a part of that as a result of our upcoming national elections. But this has not been a good period for international governance, and I hope we can make it so. So let me just begin with that. Secondly, let me just thank everybody for being a part of this. This isn't an ideal forum, obviously, with the technology we're using and a situation we face, particularly in the United States with the pandemic and so on, and throughout the world. But I want to thank all of you for being a part of this and for participating actively in this. We're fortunate to have Vint Cerf with us. He's going to provide us with a keynote, and then we're going to go to a broad discussion of the topic. We should be wrapping up about 10:40. So this will not be that long, but I want to thank all of you for being a part of this and participating with us, especially Vint and Ramu, who will be moderating the discussion itself. So without further ado, let me introduce Vint. Vint, thank you so much for being a part of this and for helping us to get started on the discussion this morning. You're on.
Yes. Now we honor to introduce Mr. Ramu Damodaran, Chief of the Chief of the United Nations Academic Impact and Editor-in-Chief of United Nations Chronicle magazine. He started to host this event. This event is the United Nations 2045 Roundtable. So we are honored to introduce Mr. Ramu Damodaran. Ramu.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tuan. You always summon such a galaxy of distinguished individuals that I feel humbled to be here. And I'm particularly privileged today. I think, like most of us, for the last few evenings, I've been watching the Democratic Party convention virtually on television. And it brought to mind the very first convention which I witnessed again on television after I came to the United States for the first time in 1986, which was the 1988 convention. And I still remember how movingly Governor Dukakis spoke there, and particularly his reference to a sense of community, which he described as an idea as simple as it is profound and one of the most powerful in human history. So thinking of that sense of community really sharpens the focus of our conversation today when we talk about a people-centered economy for work and for life. And that too is an important distinction, I think, because work is something that all of us need to do in order to, frankly, survive. There is life beyond work, and that's not something very easy to recognize at this particular point in time when, as someone said, we are not really working from home, but we are living at work. But all the same, the fact that there is joy in living, if we balance nonetheless in this regard. And I know that we will hear from Professor Vint Cerf ideas on how we can be people-centered in this cause. Because that brings us back to what you, Tuan, have really envisioned as Unleashed 2045. And we're now in the 75th year of the United Nations. When we reach our centenary 25 years from now, I think the single most compelling phrase that will resonate in the Charter of the United Nations is that of the dignity and worth of the human person. And that is what, to go back to Governor Dukakis' metaphor, coalesces into a community, making it not person-centered, with which we began, but people-centered. And hopefully by 2045, in another phrase that Governor Dukakis used in 1988, the fires of innovation and enterprise will continue to blaze throughout this planet, from sea to sea and coast to coast. Long before we spoke of surfing the internet or asked people to surf the internet, the word surf was not a verb, but a noun. And that noun is in the person of Cerf, the internet, the gentleman who was synonymous with the internet, and whom it is now my privilege to introduce and welcome to share his thoughts with us. Sir, we look forward to hearing you.
Thank you so much. I could listen to you all day. For one thing, you speak of things I care about, and second, you have a fantastic voice. So if I ever have the chance to listen to you speak longer, I will look forward to that. Let me thank Tuan for inviting me to participate in this meeting. The topic is something of central interest to me. The whole idea of people-centeredness for all that we do, both in our society, in our work, in our other endeavors, in our family and home, is all absolutely essential. And why should we have to raise this point of people-centeredness? It's because we have become a society that is deeply dependent on machines. We are a creative species. We are a species that are tool makers. And as our history has unfolded, we have increased our dependence on and our ability to create machines that work for us or help us do our work. So I think that it's very important for us to recall the people-centered focus that we are drawn to in today's discussions. I love the point that was made about living at work. I'm down in my basement right now, and I've been down here for almost 5 months since coming down with COVID-19 in March and recovering in April. And now my company has shut its doors for at least for the present, and probably as long as July of next year. So I too am living at work, although I'm actually rather happy. Normally I would travel 80% of my time, and now I haven't traveled at all, which means with the click of a mouse, I can go from Australia to Austria and be home for dinner. So this is not such a bad situation for me, but it is a terrible situation for millions around the world, perhaps even billions in many different dimensions. But that's not exactly the topic we want to cover today. Today, I want to talk first about a brief notes about the history of internet, because I believe that that history informs us as we think about the newest tool that we have, which is machine learning and artificial intelligence. So let me take you back to the 1960s and point out that one of the key insights into the world that we have now in the 21st century was an alternative to the telephone system. It's called packet switching. And I won't bore you with all the details, but it's basically computers using electronic postcards to communicate with each other. That key concept led to an experiment by the American Defense Department, the Defense Advanced Research a network. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Hang on one. There. That's the hazard of living at work. The phone goes off. So the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency decided that it was going to experiment with packet switching as a way of linking computers to each other, and it was very successful. The result of that successful experiment was to ask whether we could use different kinds of packet switching over radio and satellite in addition to dedicated telephone circuits, to link multiple networks together, multiple networks of computers together. That was called the internet, and that too was very successful. It began to expand over, especially in the 1980s. And then in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Tim Berners-Lee at the CERN facility in Europe invented what we all know as the World Wide Web. This was an enormously powerful application that allowed information to be easily injected into the internet and to be consumed. It included formatted text and imagery and eventually sound and video. And that's, of course, what we are seeing today in this call, is all of those media at the same time. The introduction of the World Wide Web was a dramatic event. And over the decades that have followed, many, many new applications have been designed and built to fit within that framework. And so that was a very, very powerful milestone. Companies have been formed across the entire range of internet requirements, from the low-level communication systems, radio, dedicated circuits, optical fiber, all the way up to the apps that we run on our smartphones, which brings me to another big milestone in 2007, the arrival of the smartphone from Apple. Not to forget that Nokia had been doing some very smart phones prior to that, but they didn't have all of the features that the smartphone, the iPhone that Steve Jobs introduced. And so that technology merged with the internet and became an extremely powerful mechanism for reinforcing both technologies. The mobile made internet more accessible from anywhere you could get a signal. And of course, the internet made the mobile more useful because of the vast quantity of information that it had available and the applications that could be run on top of it. Well, that leads to the next problem, which is the huge quantity of information on the internet was so vast that nobody could find anything. And so search engines had to be invented. And those search engines have become very part of our daily lives. We turn to them as a tool. Introduction is machine learning. And artificial intelligence is not a new idea. It started at the same time as the ARPANET project. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency was investing in research in artificial intelligence in the 1960s. But the tools that were available then, the computing power that was available then, simply did not reveal the potential that we have now discovered with multi-layer neural networks. There were attempts to build such neural networks in the 60s and 70s, but they were very small, 1 or 2 layers deep. Not enough capacity to do the kinds of things that we do today, which is speech recognition and machine translation and self-driving cars and image recognition for medical care. And it just, you can go on and make a longer list than I can. So why do I end up here? Well, I end up here partly because that's the topic of today's discussion. What I need for you to appreciate is that the side effects of invention do not always become apparent when they are invented and when they are put to use. Indeed, in some cases, it may take decades to understand in some depth the consequences of technology and information, phishing, fraud, all kinds of malware attacks, a variety of things that people do that are harmful to other people. Now, we all understand that in our social history as human beings, that these problems have existed in other contexts. So this is not new. It's just a new medium in which some of these bad behaviors occur. The question, of course, is what to do about that. And the response to this is varied. In some cases, we can take technical mechanisms and prevent the abuse or the harm from happening. But that doesn't always work. The second thing, as the society, we can set acceptable. And if we detect you acting that way, behaving that way, there will be consequences. That's what law enforcement is all about. We agree on a set of behavior patterns that are acceptable and others that are not, and we prosecute people who are behaving badly. And that's, of course, if we can catch them. And that, too, is not always possible. And so in the end, we say, please don't do that. It's just wrong. That's moral suasion. And some people will say, well, that doesn't sound very effective. And yet, as all of you know, that when a large body of people agree on certain behavior patterns as acceptable or unacceptable, there's a lot of social pressure to behave properly. So I think those three mechanisms must be put to work in order to deal with some of the abusive behaviors we encounter in the internet. The question now before us, of course, will be whether we will see similar kinds of problems with the introduction of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I would say that it's almost certain that we will encounter those kinds of problems as well, because machine learning is a powerful new tool. And as we explore all of its powerful positive uses, which we experience daily, we will eventually experience the abuses to which this new technology is put to work, and we will be confronted once again with the question of how to manage that problem. So I want to draw your attention now to some of the things that we've already learned about machine learning, and to say a little bit about how to cope with those problems. One thing that some of you will have encountered is that the machine learning tools, while doing extraordinary things, like the recognition and translation of many languages back and forth, that it also makes mistakes. So it's not better than human beings. Anyone who thinks a computer program never makes a mistake is wrong. They do make mistakes all the time. Part of the reason being that the programmers didn't get the program right. And so the programmer's mistake leads to the computer's mistake, leads to perhaps possibly abusive or harmful consequences. So we know that machine learning tools don't always get it right. We also know that some of the failures are quite subtle, although they are also dramatic. So a common example is what are called generative adversarial networks. This is a machine learning system which is trying to fool another machine learning system. So the one system is trying to recognize, for example, categories of animals: dogs, cats, elephants, crocodiles, and so on. The other machine is trying to change the images in small and slight ways to fool the other machine. It turns out that it's possible to do this with very, very small changes. So an example, common example, you might have trained a machine learning algorithm to recognize cats and dogs and so on. You show it a cat and it says it's a cat. Then the generative adversarial network modifies just a few pixels in the image. To a human being, it still looks like a cat. To the computer programming algorithm, the machine learning algorithm, it looks like a fire truck. And of course, your response to this is, how could it possibly be a fire truck? It doesn't look anything like a fire truck. And the answer is that the machine learning system doesn't see things the way we do. Human beings have this amazing ability to abstract from images, to recognize various features in the images that help us identify things. The machine learning tools are recognizing features, but not necessarily the ones that you and I would normally use in order to identify a cat and a dog and a crocodile. This is just one very trivial example of the ways in which machine learning tools can fail. And the reason that's so important for us to keep this in mind is that the failures can be very harmful. This brings us back to the whole people-centered theme of this call, which is about designing, building, and using and applying technology, keeping its people-centeredness in mind, understanding how it will either help or harm other people in our society. So as we start to apply machine learning tools and other artificial intelligence extensions of that, it's essential to have in the back of our minds a sense for how those tools might fail or might be deliberately abused. And we will need an international cooperation in order to induce and introduce this people-centeredness into the use of artificial intelligence, because we will use these techniques on a global scale. The internet has already penetrated about 50% or more of the world. And of course, as the chief internet evangelist at Google, I'm hoping that it will be possible for everyone to get access to the internet before the end of this decade, and certainly by 2045. If they want access to it, it would not occur to me to force anyone to use the internet, but I would like it to be accessible, available, sustainable, affordable, and useful for anyone who wishes to use it. So now we have to figure out what the international agreements are going to be, not only to deal with the abuses of the internet and its applications, but also the potential abuses of machine learning. And that is going to require some deep thought and some deep understanding and some dependence on technologists who are much smarter than I am about how those technologies could be abused and what we can do to both detect and defend against that. And so as we design a people-centered and artificially intelligent world where the tools get smarter and smarter, we will have to think our way through exactly that set of problems. And so those of you who are on this call and those that you will talk to afterwards, I say to you how important it is that we get this right, that we consider how to good effect, and how we make sure that if they are abused, that we detect and defend against that. And so that's quite a challenge and charge to give to this group, but your histories already tell us you're capable of dealing with charges like this. And that's why you've been assembled today to talk about this problem and the promise of artificial intelligence and the problems that it may introduce. So Tuan, I will stop there and invite further discussion in the hope that we will all come away with important insight into this challenge.
Thank you so much, sir. That was truly stimulating. And I'm very grateful for your pegging the idea of a truly internet-connected world by 2045. I think that will really live up to the idea of unleashed in the wonderful phrase that Tuan and the Governor Dukakis and the Boston Global Forum have come up with as our target for that time. And as you say, anything people-centered has to be democratic. So there will be a necessity of the element of choice. It's not that internet will be imposed on the, 10 billion people at that point in time, but they will be given the opportunity to realize its advantages, its benefits, and all that comes with it, including, as you so eloquently described, the marvels of artificial intelligence. Thank you, sir. I think we will have a very, very stimulating discussion, which I'd like to lead off by inviting, bringing the often arcane world of technology to our homes, our living rooms, and frankly, our lives.
Thank you so much thank you, Ramu, so much. And I'm today very honored to introduce concept and model of the AIWS Society AIWS Society City. We are co-sub name that is the AIWS City from 2000 city because of civil society and AI government. So a good economy has a thing about new value and include traditional value. You can see traditional value as a products, service, and everything we create for the people. You can see, but virtual value, that is who the people create and contribute for society by volunteers and by many great things they work, but how to value them. And we name that is social value. That means AIWS values include traditional values and AIWS, that is the social value. And AIWS City operate based on this value system. We need education system to support and enhance people with new knowledge, and also we try to make them that became thoughtful civil society. We upgrade and to make became that is the intellectual society, thoughtful civil society. Yes, that is the component, and we try to make infrastructure and apply AI government. That is government assisted by AI and internet and data science and blockchain, everything new technology to make a very good and very pure environment an ecosystem for creative, for every people can create value for each other, and ask Vint Cerf ideas, and also citizen contribute, society and government need to create ecosystem to make environment for the people can create values easier. Yeah, and companies also apply the concept from the people-centered economy of Vint Cerf. That is our concept in a very short time. So I talk a little bit, introduce, we start, and we will run and do contribute by that is our leaders, Governor Michael Dukakis, and Boston Global Forum leaders, and Michael Dukakis Institute board members. And a special thank to Vint Cerf, the father of the internet, and also Alex Sandipelen and Professor Nasty Chukri and our people in AIWS Society Innovation Network. That is, we hope we will make our concept, principle, and models happen, and as our ideas make internet for the people, AI for the human being, and good environment, and a great creative ecosystem for every people. That is named AIWS City. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ramu, and I hope this is successful in the future with that is the contribute for United Nations 2045 initiative, 100 year of UN. We have a great environment. Thank you so much, Ramu. Yes, and our dear friend and people join today.
Thank you so much, Tuan, and thank you for taking the initiative to start this wonderful series. In your very eloquent presentation, you used the word value, and I think in the course of it, use that powerful word in so many forms. Value in the sense of a principle that we cherish or hold dear, value in the sense of how we examine the worth, as the Charter said, and I mentioned this, the worth of the human person, and also value in the sense of taking what we often assume for granted and realizing its intrinsic power, which, as you have said, we have done in so many areas of technology whose benefits we are reaping today. And if we go to the vision of Dr. Cerf by 2045, will make truly universal. Thank you. It's now my privilege to introduce Dr. Zlatko Lagundzija, the former Prime Minister of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Apart from being a statesman, he is also himself a PhD in computer science and engineering. In fact, he acquired his PhD in 1988, the year that we referred to earlier in the context of the Democratic Convention that year. So, Mr. Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Ramu. I mean, it's really my privilege, and thanks to Tuan, Governor, and of course, Vint, and all other distinguished, really, participants. I'll just start with my remark that we are entering the third millennium that is marked with the growth, the impact of knowledge in science and technology. And those two types of knowledges, episteme, science, and techne, crafting, as Aristotle named them, were changing our lives as never before. Vint was very clear about it. It is not only about how many ideas any one of us have, but it is about how many of them ultimately may collide by working together with other stakeholders. So establishment of a new and upgrade of current AI and internet ecosystem global governance structures, I think, are the most visible common denominator of needed actions that are defined in 4 different credible reports that I'm going to refer as statements, which have been part of it or that I used as important, convened in October last year, and adopted policy recommendations, a statement that we call digital transformation and future of democracy. How can AI drive democracy? So we're discussing policy recommendations to build a new social contract, and Tuan and Governor are more the contract of global digital governance while protecting inclusive and democratic mandate for policymakers, as well as renewal of the AI pre-planning workshop in New Delhi, February this year, was one of my last pre-corona era live, physically, on-site international conference on the issues that we're talking about today, where we're discussing needs for Guterres, recommending facilitation of cooperation. So report ends with something which is and it fit for purpose for the fast-changing digital age. 2 months ago, Guterres issued his report called Roadmap to Digital Cooperation, defining 8 key areas of action. The last recommendation that I want to refer in that report is titled Global Digital Cooperation, Building the Architecture for Digital Cooperation. Underlying significant gaps in global cooperation, 1946, UN Atomic Energy Commission was established by resolution number 1 of UN General Assembly, and it was supposed to deal with the problems raised by the discovery of atomic energy, end of the quote. A year later, Bulletin of Atomic Scientists established something which I like very much. I mean, I don't like it, but I like to use it. Doomsday Clock as a symbol that represent the likelihood of a man-made global catastrophe. I see, Vint, that you're laughing, and I'm very glad that I think you know which direction I'm going. So the clock originally set was in 1947 was 7 minutes to midnight. By 1953, it went in wrong direction, ending 2 minutes to midnight. In the meantime, United Nations Atomic Energy Commission was officially disbanded in 1952 with extending threats of Korean War, nuclear race, and Cold War dynamics. So Doomsday Clock has been set backwards and forward 24 times since then. And the largest ever, or call it the best so far, number was being 17 minutes to midnight in 1991. And the smallest 100 seconds, less than 2 minutes, in January this year, when it was adjusted for the last time. But the major global threats in the last decade moved beyond atomic energy, including technology and the things that we are talking about today, and climate change impact. So this is the reason why I'm making reference to landmark address by President Eisenhower back in 1953, called International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. So though instead of UN Commission in 46, agency was established in 57, independent of UN through its own international treaty, the IAEA statute. It reports to both UN General Assembly and Security Council with membership of 170 out of 193 states. So today, I think that what we need urgently is leadership call for, I call it AI, artificial intelligence, and internet ecosystem for work and life in peace, followed by establishment of a structure that can be for working purposes, just for working purposes, named as the International Artificial Intelligence Agency, IAIA, or 2 times IA. In the mirror, it looks like artificial intelligence. The question remains, do we have 10 years time, like 6 decades ago, to move from UN Commission to functioning agency that will be dealing with artificial intelligence, like it was the case with atomic energy? In order to start going in the right direction, I think we have to move beyond Aristotle's episteme and techne, beyond science and technology only, to his third type of knowledge, which he called pronesis, or we can translate it as wisdom and intelligence. So I see today's discussion as another call to leaders to show wisdom and leadership using the science and technology fruits in order to move our planet in the right direction. So establishing some kind of new artificial intelligence and internet ecosystem for life and work that is driven by democratic and inclusive governance. And I believe that we can do it, winning the race against time as well, using episteme, techne, and pronesis. How? Together. Thank you very much. I'm impressed with today's gathering, and thank you for really being part of this. Thank you, Tuan. Thank you, Vint. Thank you, Governor. And thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. And thank you for that rallying cry of all together, which I think is something we should summon. I was very struck and moved by a reference to Resolution 1/1 of the United Nations General Assembly, which came, as you know, in the aftermath of the devastation in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, whose anniversary we commemorated earlier this month. That was, as Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, a rallying cry for humanity. And I recall the debate in the General Assembly on that resolution, where the United States representative said, science is not the monopoly of any one nation. And I believe it was the representative of Poland who in that same debate said, we need to move forward to help protect the present generation, which is afflicted by fierce in the midst of so many distinguished scientists. I'm very heartened and reassured by the tone our conversation is leading to make science truly humane, purposeful, and as of the Keio University in Japan, who's been described as the internet samurai of Japan, Keio University Network, which he founded for interdisciplinary research into computer technology and electronic learning systems. Dr. Murai, thank you. You have the floor, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Very good.
All right. Thank you very much. I just, thank the privileged and the honor to be here and seeing all of you tonight. Well, decisions to utilize the new digital services on the modern internet, such as this video conference system, at least 10 times more than they have been using it in the past, right? And this is a new opportunity to design and propose for the new type of development of the technology for the society. So in Japan, for example, then we are working on rewriting our national IT strategy after 20 years since it was written last time. So I was involved even the 20 years ago, was helping to write this national basic law of IT strategy. And now we immediately started to work on rewriting them with this experience. This is because the COVID-19 impact is so big and for the strategy of a national digital technology scene. So adding things like, this is for everyone and inclusion type of, concept and the information accessibility, which is to be supported largely by the sophisticated AI and machine learning technology. So that's what we are doing that. And the second point, therefore, I think it's very important for the AI and the internet to serve for health care and life and the medical for the human being. In addition to the market finance of AI and the internet in the past 20 years. Okay, for example, IoT, smart mobility, smart city, smart home, and the environment by the AI and the internet, of course, and has been targeted mainly to certainly as something contributing to our health care and the medical care. This value change are in front of us. So this is the second point. So the last point I'd like to raise about the cybersecurity. So cybersecurity, the Vint already mentioned the kind of abuse of the technology, right? Abuse of the sophisticated technology like AI and the internet has been kind of increasing the threat of our society, technology society for certain. Cybersecurity area should be facing on to solve those issues, of course. We need to continue working on it. And but at the same time, we can do much better job for not to abuse the technology, but working hard for the ethical use of technology. By ethical use of the AI and the internet, I mean the individual work for the ethical things to others and the society, not only for the business and the oneself. So in Japan, we sometimes really facing very serious natural disaster like an earthquake and damaging our people's life, our society completely. And every time
of making international relations in the present age cyber inclusive. And that's a wonderful concept, which I'm sure bears greater study and deliberation. Professor Chukri?
Hi, Nasli. I saw you. Leslie?
No? Yes?
Yes, now I hear you. Good.
Two sets of comments, and I will try to be brief. The first has to do with the people-centeredness. People, we are all centered into three systems, three environments, and we don't have a choice of opting out. We're centered in our social systems, we're centered in our natural environment, life-supporting properties, and we're centered in the spaces and interactions created by the internet. And it's that interconnection that has to be managed. Now, I'd like to remind you a point that was made earlier by Vint Cerf at the very end about the importance of trying to reach international agreements over performance, behavior, ethics, and so forth. And here's the good news. We do have a viable set, give or take, of international agreements on relations among states, on even cybercrime, and on and on and on. There's a corpus of experience and record. We have a lot of international agreements, and apparently perfectly viable, as much as international agreements can be viable, in the area of life-supporting properties. It took forever for the international community in its whole to recognize that preservation and restitution and resilience of the natural environment is somewhat important. So these are in place. We have very few agreements, former interstate, on any aspect or many aspects of the cyber domain and the internet. But we have operational agreements by those that run the systems worldwide. And so far, the governments have lagged, and it is the private sector, individuals, that have been the major operators. Unfortunately, we need the participation of governments. So here's the good news. The legacy that we have from agreements on political behavior and social behavior, that space, and the legacy we have about the natural environment has created a context for international agreements on performance on the internet that has some interesting properties. One, expert opinion is valued, and it is brought in and integrated. Second, representatives of civil society are considered to be legitimate and are sought after. Third, any agreement requires consensus, so we have built-in consensus. And finally, by definition, the stakeholders are involved. So this didn't happen overnight. This evolved very gradually. So all things considered, when we begin to think about international agreements in the context that Vint Cerf mentioned, we have a foundation, really a solid foundation to move on. My second point, and again, I will try to be very brief, is about the people-centered economy at the social level. Keeping in mind that people-centered means individual behavior. We have to worry about individuals. One of the least appreciated concepts when we think about alternatives to what we now have is to think about satisficing instead of maximizing. All of our models, our best economic models in the field, with a plural, is based on more, on expansion, on maximization, and we haven't given satisficing enough credit. In fact, we're not quite sure how to develop metrics of what the equations would look like. But if we're going to be people-centered, then the satisfaction of individuals really is important. I can make the argument on ethical grounds, and I don't need to make it to this group, but let me make the argument on pragmatic grounds. It is much more likely to have a people-centered society with people that are more satisfied rather than less, that appreciate their involvement in the process rather than being herded, and that believe that ultimately there is a formula for justice and a formula for fairness. So just from the point of view of pragmatism, satisficing is something that we should consider quite seriously. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shukri. Thank you for that. Again, looking at the perspective of 75 years of the United Nations, we've really moved from a state-centric model to a person-oriented model. We've had the Human Development Report. A few years ago, we started something called the World Happiness Index. And I think the idea that you have of a World Satisfaction Index is very compelling. I suppose it also raises questions about, can you be satisfied but yet not happy? Or must you be happy if you're satisfied? There's a whole realm out there, which I think human and artificial intelligence can combine to address, perhaps by 2045. Thank you so much for that. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Hiroshi Esaki from the University of Tokyo. We've been privileged to have him as a guest of the Boston Global Forum before. Dr. Esaki is also working on a remarkable project called the Green University of Tokyo. And he has coined a wonderful phrase, taking us beyond the Internet of Things to the Internet of Functions. So let's look forward to hearing from you, sir.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it is my honor and privilege for joining this precious event. I'm one generation younger than Professor Jun Murai, who has been a long-time research partner for me. Firstly, I fully agree with the importance of individual, as previous speaker mentioned, while respecting diversity and uniqueness of people. The internet is built by the end-to-end architecture in order to connect anyone on the planet. And anyone is individual, not a group of human beings who has been categorized as similar or same feature by their data on the net. We must respect power of the individuals, I believe. The internet has experienced the swings between peer-to-peer and client-server in its history. In general, an innovation was implemented with peer-to-peer architecture. When some application or service was recognized by people as a good service, it went to the client-server architecture implementation, while maintaining the end-to-end architecture. This means that I believe we must respect, encourage, and support the networking of the ends and individuals on the net. This means the networking should be firstly for individual. Next, I want to discuss about the power of the net and digital. One of the achievements by Green of the digital is expanding the individual toward the net through the release from anchoring of function to physical human body. Before the internet, human society was like IoT, Internet of Things. It was internetworking of physical individuals. After the internet, human body was expanded into the net. The first stage was sending and sharing digital data representing our own knowledge and will by codes, which will be generated by yourself. Now we can send our copies of the function to remote site on our planet. I observed this is innovation like from IoT internet function to IOF internet function that or internet of codes. By the gene of digitalization, some functions anchored to our human body can be released from human to interwork with the function belonging to other persons on the planet, wherever they are. Because of changing the human society from IoT to IOF, physical is significantly expanded as well as the logical scope of stakeholders, I believe. This leads that the importance of collaboration by multi-stakeholder is critical for the future digital society. I've served as the board of trustees of the Internet Society until the beginning of last month. The Internet Society strongly and strategically promotes multi-stakeholder collaboration for the restoration of the trust in the Internet. We propose the collaboration of security, collaboration by multi-stakeholder, the end-to-end encryption for every single individual, and policy development based on scientific, technological, data, and fact, which is evidence-based policy making. Based on this direction, we promote Internet is for everyone. The Internet must be open, common, transparent, autonomous, end-to-end cooperating, and digital sharing platform for everyone on the planet. The last point I want to about the last point I want to discuss is about the symmetric relationship among individual, community, and government regarding security, including cybersecurity. I think that by COVID-19, we recognize the importance of self-defense as the first measure for our security. In cybersecurity, self-protection is the first, as being implicitly mentioned. Mutual help is the second, and the public help is the last. If this order is opposite, the system does not work well nor healthy, I believe. This means that the autonomy by individual and community is important to protect good society. This is a symmetric relationship among individual, community, and government. Thank you. That's all for my consideration.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saki, and thank you for bringing the element of trust, and which, as you say, has also to be amongst the multi-stakeholders themselves, as between them and the community and society and the government. That, I think, is a very, very important value for us to keep in mind as this conversation proceeds. So thank you, sir. Now I'd like to introduce another very cherished friend, Dr. David Silbersweigel. He reminds us that when we talk about what can go wrong in an electronic or mechanical sense with artificial intelligence or computer systems, we have a precedent in the human body itself where we can have what are called brain circuitry dysfunctions, but which, with the same skills and brains that other people possess, we're able to address, contain, and perhaps even heal. So there is hope for artificial intelligence in that term from the human plane. David, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Ramu. It's so wonderful to be able to start to have some more frequent and regular discussions, and really appreciate the opportunity, and Tuan, as always, and Vint and all the speakers. I'm a neurologist as well as a psychiatrist, and in a way, this transcends then the distinction between and among fields and also levels of neural networks and networks. We, in our human capacities, have emergent functions from our networks. And we have hidden layers, if you will, that are not accessible to us even as consciously aware beings, that have to do with how we process information and emotion and make decisions and regulate behavior. All of this gets transduced and magnified and accelerated by the technology that we're talking about today, to a point where, the Internet of Things, we've heard the Internet of Functions, in a way, the Internet is an instantiation of the Internet of Brains, because there's a brain sitting behind every computer, and now, of course, there are computer brains, if you will, in AI that are being developed, and how all these brains are going to interact in a pro-social rather than anti-social way is a major, major concern that keeps coming up again and again. While it's an oversimplification, and you've heard me talk about this before in fora that we've had, I think this sort of pro-social versus antisocial tendencies of us as individuals, of us as a species, come to the fore, and the notion of in-groups and out-groups, and the tendencies that we see magnified now by technology of authoritarian governments to subjugate and manipulate, or corporations for that matter, or bad actors. These are the things that we have to protect against as we think about pathology, if you will, on the internet. Like any system, if we think about it metaphorically, but also as a heuristic and as a way to hopefully identify and address problems as a health problem, then I think that, or as mediators or moderators or risk factors or resilience factors for health problems, then we can start to mitigate or minimize the risk factors for bad behavior and governance, and maximize the resilience factors. And resilience is not just the absence of the negative, it's the ability, despite a perturbation, despite a setback, despite negative elements, to be able to come back to homeostasis, to regulation, in an adaptive, flexible, positive sense. And so, in a way, I guess I'd like to advocate for the use, not just conceptually, but also practically and in terms of problem solving, of medical approaches. And as was alluded to really look at these things as public health issues. We know that stress and trauma are enormous in terms of their sequelae. We know that that mental health is health, that the mind and the body are connected, that mental illness and conditions actually cause more disability in the world than cancer and heart disease, and that all of these things are linked when one thinks about human rights and responsibilities. So, I guess what would be possible to add to the discussion from a physician, brain scientist point of view is the notion that the more we can look at what's going on the internet and in human society and the interaction of those two from the point of view of maximizing human health and mental health, and the more we can utilize what we're learning in recent decades about the brain mind and ways in which people and groups of people can be mobilized for good, not just for deleterious and dangerous things, the more we can integrate those into the discussion, then we will have additional tools with which to address some of the dangers and realize some of the possibilities that we're talking about today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. And I'm always fascinated how you bring your neurological and physiological imagery and metaphors into the larger canvas of human life. And I think that the point you made about the absence of the negative not being an assurance of the presence of the positive is something that we at the United Nations have learned over the past 75 years, and I suspect we'll continue to learn over the next 25. So thank you for that and all the other insights that you shared. We'd now like to open this to a conversation where we have questions from the other distinguished members present here, their own ideas and responses. I'd like to start off by inviting Dr. Mikhail Kuprianov, who is from the St. Petersburg Electrotechnical and who has been working to introduce a new technological culture in disciplines at the university at all levels, from the bachelor's to the doctorate. So maybe Dr. Kuprianov, you could begin our conversation, sir.
Mikhail. Okay. Mikhail, you hear me? Okay. Maybe.
Otherwise, while Dr. Kuprianov comes, we can give the mic to Dr. Sung Nguyen of Google. Are you here, sir?
Yeah. Sung Nguyen, yeah. So if you want to discuss with Vint, please raise question.
Oh, okay. Hear me?
Yeah. Okay. Mikhail.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I am a
Thank
technical support for.
Thank you.
Please,
Dear participation, dear participation of the meeting, it's great honor for me to participate in such an event. Thank you for the invitation. I will be brief. I represent the Military Technical University in St. Petersburg and Institute of Artificial Intelligence, which we create with support of NDI. And many thanks to Michael Dukakis and Tuan also for their support and assistance. Our goal is work of the mind problems associated with the use of artificial intelligence systems. The world today has new challenges related to this AI. People today are not sure about the decision that machines make. This decision cannot be explained today. We also have a problem with personal data, which is needed to train, for example, neural networks. For example, in medicine, we are very interested in collaboration in these areas. In our city, we are participating in the implementation of special program to promote artificial intelligence technology in medicine, education, transport, and government. We are also ready to participate in the event organized by MDI and University in Boston and have a cooperation program. This is very important for building an intelligent planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. May I now invite Mr. Sung Yuen? We'll have maybe some comments and then we can have responses.
I think Ramu, because of the time limited, so I think we can move to invite Alan Citrin.
Sure. Dr. Alan Citrin, please, if you're with us.
Alan?
Yes, I am.
Yes, please.
So my questions for the general audience are, people have talked about frameworks. Dr. Cerf talked about how in a society we establish controls and the various means. I've heard a lot of talk about AI trust, AI ethics, and AI explainability. Does that provide a framework for establishing the types of goals that we are talking about? Or are there other ways we should be looking at this and approaching it?
Would there be any takers for that question of Dr. Citrin?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yes, please.
No, any responses to Dr. Citrin's question from our panel?
I think invite Vint Cerf, please.
Yeah, Alan, can you please repeat the question and direct the question to
Thank you.
the panels? That could be easier. Thank you.
Many members of the panel have talked about trying to establish some sort of framework of governance. One of my concerns with any aspect of technology is that technology seems to run far ahead of the ability to establish these governance frameworks. Within AI, I have read a lot about governance frameworks based on three concepts: trustworthy AI, ethical AI, and explainable AI. And so my question is there some traction being gained on these concepts? Does this provide some basis for beginning to develop a legal and a regulatory framework that would allow the world to achieve the types of goals that you have all articulated? And if not, how else might we approach this? How do we make this happen?
It's Vint. If I could jump in for just a second and respond to that. I think you've labeled three very valuable. I'm sorry, for people who are not speaking, could you mute your microphone? We're getting some feedback. Nazli, your microphone needs to be muted. And others.
Please mute it.
Yes. If you move your cursor, you'll be able to see a control bar pop up. Click on the microphone and it should turn red. I wish I could do that remotely. Anyway, I want to.
No. Okay. Microphone.
There we go. Okay, thank you, Nazli. You appreciate that. So let me come back to the question. The explainable AI is very important because honestly, the way these things tend to work is very obscure, and we're still struggling with how to get AI to explain itself in the form of machine learning. So that's one thing. The triad that Alan mentioned is very helpful, and people are trying that out. I would add one other thing, and that's principles. The fact that governance can't keep up with technology is, in fact, has been observed before. And rather than coming up with very specific things that are governance rules that are specific to technology, coming up with principles that you want that technology to observe, I think, is a longer living mechanism. And so that's, I would add to that, to the three things that you mentioned, the introduction of principles which you wish the governance system to observe.
That's very helpful, thank you, because that has been clearly lacking in a lot of what I've seen, not in the work from the AIWS, which is focused on principles, but elsewhere. So that's very helpful, thank you.
Next speaker.
Thank you, sir. Is Mr. Sung Newman with us?
No, I think we next maybe the Levlin King or some other people. Sung is
sure. Dr. Levlin King
or Maxwell Zutter. Yep.
Yeah. Dr. Zutter, are you with us? Oh, then we can move on to Mr. Martin McAdam, sir.
Hi there, and what a fantastic presentation we've had today. I was going to say this afternoon, but it's afternoon where I am, not necessarily where everybody else is. Just like to throw up a question. There was many different interesting concepts developed today, but one is in relation to the exploitation of AI. I mean, we already see the impact that it's had on democracies. I won't say AI has had on democracies, but certainly the social media has had on democracies around the world. So is the solution to this a technical one, or is it one for a legal framework? Just to kick that out. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Would there be someone on our panel who could respond to that?
I think Vint, please, Vint, respond.
Well, I'm happy to, although I don't feel entirely competent to, considering the other members of the panel. And in fact, now the screen is, I've lost the question that was asked. Would you please ask it one more time? I apologize.
Basically, the question is that in order to prevent AI from exploiting negatively democracies around the world, do we need a legal framework or a technical framework to prevent this?
So the answer is almost certainly yes, but it's for the same reason that we have and need legal frameworks for dealing with other abusive behaviors. And so agreements about identifying parties who are doing something harmful is necessary. Reciprocal agreements about extradition are almost certainly needed. I suspect that Nazli Chukri and others can be much more articulate about this than I can. But in the absence of international cooperation, the abuse of these tools is going to be very difficult to deal with because you have to identify the bad actors. And this is in tension with privacy. And you've seen the great desire for privacy in the European GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, which are well-intended, but they might have the consequence that identifying bad actors is made more difficult. So there's clear need for dialogue here in a global setting in order to create a framework which is functionally workable to maintain safety and security for the people who are in an online environment and who are using artificial intelligence tools.
Yes, I would like to add more some note follow with Vint Cerf. That is the Michael Dukakis Institute and Boston Global Forum AIWS Society. We have center, that is the Center for AI and digital policy, and we do for that. And Governor Michael Dukakis called from August 2018 that we need international accord about AI and cybersecurity. So I think we continue to do that, and why not? We will invite our colleagues join with us to do for this policy and legal system. And we have Mark Rutenberg. He is a great people do for that this issue. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuan. We have a few minutes, and I'd just like to invite thoughts and comments from Bill Ottman, if he's with us, with Professor Kirill Krinkin from Russia. There's Tabik Luan from Vietnam Television. If you're with us, please do share any thoughts you have.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I have actually one general question to the panelists. So many speakers today told about the global collaboration between technology and humanity. So my question is about what do you think? Do we need to apply more efforts in the technology side to build the reliable future, or we have to apply more efforts in the society side to improve people behavior, people habits to use technology? Because in the past people use technology like a tool, but now it looks like human people live in the technology environment. So what do you think?
Thanks so much. And whom may we invite to respond to that?
Well, Vint Cerf is certainly always ready with a response. It's a very good question, Kirill, and I think that we need both angles here. We absolutely have to have societal and behavioral norms from each other to the extent of the way. That's a good thing, but it doesn't always work. And so the end result is that we have to adopt behavioral norms. And those, by the way, will almost certainly apply across a wide range of technologies. Do no harm. Well, think of all of the various tools we could use to do harm. The idea is not to list every single one of them, but rather to introduce into the behavioral norms that principle.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Dr. Cerf. I think that one phrase, "it doesn't always work," sums up so much. It certainly sums up what brought us together, the United Nations, its 75th anniversary, looking to its centenary. Yes, it doesn't always work. But to extend your metaphor, if we do refine and hone our behavioral norms as nations, as governments, and certainly as individuals, and create a people-centered society in which we recognize that we are people, but so are our other fellow human beings. And when I think of that, I go back to a thought which I remember reading from the very first governor of Massachusetts, John Winthrop, when he said that we must abridge ourselves of our superfluities to supply the necessities of others. And I think that's a thought that can stand us in good stead as we bring this discussion and conversation to a close. I know with Tuan's energy and his ability to summon so many great minds within a space of so brief a period of time and have such a vibrant discussion that many of us will meet together again. I, as an observer, and all of you as those who give us thoughts to provoke, to compel, and to energize. Thank you so much and have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ramu. Thank you so much, Governor Michael Dukakis. Thank you so much, Vint Cerf, and our friend here today. Thank you, and we will see in next event in September. And we hope we have a great event in September also. See you later, and thank you so much. Oh, yeah. Governor.
See you then.
Vint, wonderful. Thank you so much, Vint. Wonderful talk. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you Đại học Đà Lạt nha. Chúc mừng Đại học Đà Lạt.